Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Sword Art Online episode review. This one's going to be for Season 1, Episode 14, The End of the World. The season finale for I suppose the mid-season finale, which is the end of the Aincrad arc. From here on out we go into the ALO arc, then into the Phantom Bullet arc, and so on, and we're into Sword Art Online 2 at that stage. But as of this episode, we finish up the Volume 2 DVD set, and we finish. This episode is adapted in the Volume 1 of Aincrad novel. So you get the start and end of the Aincrad arc in that one volume, with like Volume 2, 7, and 8 filling the rest of the stories out. But I'll just say it right now before we even get going. Tomorrow's video will be basically a overview, kind of in review of the Aincrad arc. I'll be talking about the arc as a whole in general tomorrow, and then Wednesday I will start the ALO reviews with episode 15. So yeah, just going to focus on just this last episode here, maybe a few little comments about the arc overall as it's come to an end. But the first point I want to make here is one that I actually tried to record this video just before now, but I went a bit long because I was making a few too many comments about the season overall, and I wasn't happy with how long it was, so I'll just leave that stuff for a video tomorrow. The first point I want to make was one that I tried hard to make in the first video, but I just couldn't put it into words. I couldn't get it across the way I wanted to, but so while my camera was charging up again, I really put thought into getting across what I wanted to say, and I think I have it now. Now, what I want to talk about here, first of all, is Kayaba himself, Ahihiko Kayaba. We don't learn a lot about him in the arc. He is our villain, and we just don't learn a lot about him. Even here, where we get basically his two biggest scenes in the entire series, we still don't get a lot on him. But I think the episode does get across his general idea that even though he mentions I've forgotten why I did this in the first place, you do fundamentally, I suppose, understand what he was going for with this world. In that, I think that the conclusion I came to was that as much as he is our villain, I don't think he is fundamentally villainous, in that none of what he's doing is for the sole purpose of killing people. In that, when Kirito and Asuna mention, what about the 4,000 people who died? And he just mentions they died, they won't be coming back in here or in the virtual world. It's not that he set out in making this game to kill people or anything like that. He just wanted to create a virtual world that he could treat as real. A place where he could have different laws. He could have that giant steel castle that he'd always dreamed of as a child. That's why he kind of got into virtual reality and stuff like that. That's why he invented the nerve gear. That's why he invented this game. Because he wanted to create this world that was different from the real world, yet you could still treat it as real. And so, the thing he forgets is how he decided to trap people in the game on the day of launch. Why he decided to really force this game of death upon people, and not just maybe try and make the game as realistic as possible. That's why he just forgets. The moment that switched from just being this kind of genius virtual reality maker who wanted to make this world real, to being basically the villain Ahihiko Kayaba, who all the players hate because of what he did to them. Because fundamentally, Kayaba is kind of like Kirito. Kirito's like him. You see in the first episode that Kirito mentions, I've read basically every interview this guy has ever had because I'm really interested in him. In many ways, Kayaba was his hero as this pioneer in VR technology, and the idea that Kirito eventually gets into something similar to this, in that the career path Kirito takes is more of less making a virtual world reality, but more of being able to take stuff from the virtual world and turn it into a reality in the physical world. Like the idea of just, he wants to make Yui real in the real world. That's what kind of Kirito's approach in this. But they're fundamentally very similar in that both of their main ideals when it comes to thinking about the virtual world, about Sword Art Online, is that they both treat Sword Art Online as a real world. They don't just consider it a video game that happens to have a game of death attached to it. And that's shown in just throughout the show. I think that comes across very clearly with Kirito's entire arc in this show. Just the real connections he has to the players, the real emotions he experiences with experiencing players dying, and especially most of all, and I think they make a really big point of this, the one of the realest things in the entire game is Kirito and Asuna's relationship, and that comes in terms of a lot of the plot stuff. In terms of it's their feelings for each other that break the game, that remove the control that Kayaba has over the world, and shock him and ultimately lead to his defeat. That is Asuna breaking out of her paralysis to be able to sacrifice herself to save Kirito. She was able to break this unbreakable paralysis because she loves Kirito. And because Kirito loves Asuna, he was able to stay alive seconds longer when he should have just burst into, fragments. Um, Both things shocked Kayaba. You could see that Heathcliff's face, that he was like, where did she come from? That wasn't meant to happen. And then especially Kirito's thing, staying alive when he should have exploded into shards. He smiles when that happens. Because I think at that moment you realize he's not a villain. That his whole idea here has been, he's been helping the players. He's been helping the players to finish the game. In that, as much as he wanted to be the boss on the 100th floor, he was willing to make himself beatable. He was never... That's the thing, I think. If he won, what would he get out of it? If it came to floor 100, they got through everything else, it comes down to a duel between Kirito and Heathcliff, and Heathcliff just beats him. Heathcliff's fun is all over. He's just like, okay, no one beat me at my own game, but at the same time, I kind of cheated because I own this world and stuff like that. He was happy that he was defeated because it was the players, the human players in the game, overcoming the limitations he kind of put on the players. They broke through a lot of the rules of the game and the system through sheer willpower, feelings and stuff like that, love, and just beat him. So I think that's really important to get across. That I think a lot of people just quote that line from Kayaba. I don't really remember why I did this. It was so long ago. As he is the worst villain ever. They don't do anything with him. When I think a lot of people are avoiding a lot of the subtle little scenes that you get here and the overall themes of the show that lead you to kind of get what he was about as a kind of antagonist of the show. In that, from here on out, he comes in at the end of the ALO arc to help Kirito. That their relationship is not friends or anything from this point on. They end up Kaiba ends up helping Kirito because he knows that Kirito feels the same way he does about virtual worlds. The feeling that they can be really important going forward. That Kaiba's dream was just that people could see the virtual world as something more than just a game. That they could see it as another world that they can actually go into and experience things. Whereas Kirito feels roughly the same way, and a lot of the arc in the show was about he thought Asuna to treat days in the virtual world as just as important as days in the real world. Which is so important because it links into a scene with Asuna near the end of this episode where she says that the happiest times in her whole life, this is at the point where they both believe they've died, they've saved all the other players from the game, but that they are going to die. She says that meeting Kirito was the happiest basically time in her whole life. That this character who's gone on this journey from basically being willing to sacrifice herself in the first battle just so she wouldn't be this hopeless girl in the first town. just to get out of this world, to being someone who treats her time in the game as the most important in her life because of this person she met. That's kind of what the whole Sword Art Online, this first arc, is about. And I think it comes across very clearly in this episode. Um, Maybe you'll say I'm reading too much into it, but fundamentally, I think that is the nature of what this story is about. And yeah, as I said, you get a lot of really powerful moments. As I said, it was the final fight between Kirito and Heathcliff is really well animated. The main dynamic that they play up in the fight is that Kirito knows the second he starts to use the sword skills, he throws everything into Kayaba's over to Kayaba, that he can win from there because he programmed all the skills. So he kind of has to do it just based off his own sword work, not using the skills in the game. And the second he does that, he loses. But yeah, I've already talked about the kind of those big moments in the fight. The death of Asuna, Kirito killing Kayaba, the smile. The only other thing to mention in or around that scene is his kind of final speech to everyone, and especially I think Kayaba giving Kirito the chance on floor 75 to finish the game, because that's probably the biggest issue people have with the Aincrad arc, is just, whoa, you ended it here, that's really sudden. But at the same time, it's not just a game anymore. If it was a video game, it would end on floor 100. But this is a real life turned into a video game. So, yeah, sure, they figure it out before it actually comes to an end. Either way, Kaiba gets the same reaction he would get on floor 100. That the shock of people discovering that he was behind it all along, one of the most powerful players in the game, the big commander, was the guy behind it all along. He got that same reaction here. And so he's like, why not? I'm going to get this same thing on floor 100. Why wait when you already know? And he just gives him the chance to end it all here. And I think just the way they animated Kirito's face here, lost in thought. Does he do the duel here and save everyone? Potentially stop a lot of people dying as they go through the next 25 floors? Or do they go back and retreat? And he makes the decision then and there. He has to do it here. It has to end now. He has to take the opportunity that was given to him. And as he walks up to fight Kaiba, he kind of gives his final speech to everyone that, like, he thanks Aegil for helping all of the other players, because even though he never said it to him the whole time, he knew Aegil was spending all that money he made in his store to buy armor and help all the other players. And then, kind of paying off something from the first episode, he finally kind of comes out and apologizes to Klein. I know this is something that it's only Kirito who thinks he needs to apologize to Klein. Everyone else knows that Klein is perfectly fine with what Kirito did. He realized that Kirito needed to do what he did, and fundamentally Klein just he just wanted Kirito to be safe basically the whole time. He didn't want him to feel the need to be solo, and so that was a pretty emotional thing between two of his friends. And then the final look is towards Asuna before the fight begins. But then we're pretty much getting towards the end of the episode. Obviously the 75th floor boss fight is done as of the first minute of the episode, because it wasn't the important thing, but we did have a nice little action scene at the very start. And yeah, the scene basically, as the game is coming to an end, we cut around the world and see Silica reacting to the game being over, Lisbeth. We see a lot of the characters we've met across the journey, and just their shock at the game coming to an end so suddenly, because most players in the game would know in or around where the assault team is on in terms of what floor they're trying to clear, and so it's a big shock to most of the players in the game that it ended so suddenly. But then we cut to basically, Aincrad is just this one floating castle in the sky, and they cut to just this kind of almost like control panel playing in the sky, so they can just watch the world end, Kirito, Asuna, and Kayaba. And you just get this moment where Kirito and Asuna are reunited, and throughout this whole scene, they think they are going to die together. Kayaba never confirms to them that you have survived the game, even though you technically died in the final moments, I'm going to treat it as if you finished the game as well and are going to wake up. They both are convinced this whole time that these are their final moments together. And so the emotion really comes across when like they're reflecting on their time together and they see their house that they had together crumble apart just down there in Aincrad. Then Kayaba leaves and leaves kind of the final moment in the game to those two. And I think that was pretty fitting and very, I suppose, important that Kaiba realized that his whole plan. I think the line he says is like, something more spectacular than he ever could have hoped happened in this world, and he kind of looks at them, and I think that's what it was about. That what he was looking for in terms of creating this game and watching it was for something so real to develop that maybe couldn't have happened in the real world, and that was the relationship between Kirito and Asuna. So them getting the final moment together was very fitting, and this is probably my favorite scene in the entire in this episode. Maybe one of my favorites in the entire series. It's just they're left together. They both think these are their last few seconds together, and they just kind of ask each other, okay, we haven't told each other this whole time, but what's your real name? How old are you actually? And Kirito reveals that his real name is Kazuto Kirigaya. So you get where the Kirito kind of username comes from, because since it's Japanese, you kind of reverse the names when properly saying it, I suppose, and it would be Kirigaya Kazuto. So Kiri and then To from Kazuto Kirito. While Asuna uses her actual name in the game, and her second name is Yuki. And then the whole issue of age, which they talked about a little bit in some of the more romantic episodes, just like 1 or 2 episodes ago. She was a bit worried that, like, am I a bit older than him? And then she's just like, no, I know who he is. And she just gets it confirmed to her that, like, yes, I am older than him, but it's only a year. That Kirito's 16, she's 17, so it's all fine. And then you just get the moment when he kind of just breaks down. Like, he finally knows her real name. They talked about meeting up in the real world, and they still think that they're both going to die. This is their final moments, and he just kind of apologizes for not being able to save her, that their relationship is basically going to end here, but this is the point at which he says, no, I was just happy to have met you in here. These are the happiest moments in my life. And as you fade away, basically the end of the show you think is coming, that they're going to end it on this happy but also sad moment because of what's happening to our main characters. She just kind of says, I love you forever and stuff like that. And then you get the final scene, and it's Kirito waking up, and what they do immediately upon him waking up, I think, gets across what this whole story was about. That most players in the game, when they wake up, would just be happy to be back in the real world. But I like how Kirito doesn't even the first thing he does when waking up is he remembers Asuna, and because he's alive, he thinks she must be alive, and immediately gets up. He hasn't moved in 2 years, and he has the willpower, the desire to get up, just to find her and be back together with her. That is really powerful and strong, that he hasn't been in the real world in 2 years, and he almost doesn't care about it. He just wants to meet her. And that links into just everything that was going on with Kayaba, because this relationship, which up until he wakes up has only existed in the game, in the virtual world, is so real to him that he has to have that in his real life. And they deal with that in the first few episodes of ALO really effectively, that this means so much to him, and he has to have it in real life as well as the virtual world. And that was the whole point about this show, that the virtual world and the physical world are different, but they're not so different. They are both real in their own separate ways. But that's basically where I'm going to end the video. I really like this episode. Yes, I do wish maybe we'd gotten more, like, I always want them to kind of return to the Aincrad stuff, But he is kind of doing that in the novel with the progressive stuff, and at some point when he's done with the Alicization arc, he'll probably come back to like cover 4, like 4, 5, whatever. And we'll probably get it animated as well. I think the author and I think most of the staff working on Sword Art Online, like the anime and stuff like that, they realize that Aincrad is the best arc, and will probably do more with it. Again, I'll talk more about this tomorrow, but I just want to make it clear that as much as I love the anime, the 14 episodes that make up this arc, I do to some extent agree with a lot of people who are saying that, yeah, it was like a little bit quick for what is the best arc of the show, and I do want to see more. But overall, I was happy with just the way what they focused on across these 14 episodes. That if they had had more, it would have taken away from the important character interactions, the themes that they were trying to get across, the plot that they were trying to get across. That if you had had like 100 episodes to focus on 100 floors, you wouldn't have had enough focus, and you would have had to have spread out the kind of emotional moments across too many things, that it wouldn't have had the same emotional impact that these solid 14 episodes get across. But again, I'll talk about that more tomorrow, and on Wednesday we'll get into the ALO arc. But that has been the review for The End of the World, the final episode of the Aincrad arc. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the review. Thanks for watching, and bye.